binge watched loads of the Australian Border Force over Christmas last year. I don't know what was going into me, but what always amazed me was the amount of people who brought like suitcases full of food, and it was always like fresh vegetables, eggs, and all that. And it's like, I remember one of the like border security guards was like, "Do you not think we have supermarkets here?" It was just like a really bizarre amount of food to brought into the country. So, yeah.
Yeah, they're really strict over there with things like that, just because of like disease getting into the country and all this.
Because they're an island, so they can't take the risk of.
Yeah, of course, yeah. It's just it's quite funny, but some of these programs. There was one on yesterday. It was, I think it was an Irish one or something. I can't remember. The program was on for about 30 minutes, and they didn't catch anybody. It was just like, no, they didn't have enough to get. You're thinking, why did I even waste my time having this on in the background? It was a complete waste of electricity. The people that they stopped were really suspicious. They didn't have anything on them. They had to let them go, and you're going, you could have just said that up front and just have a blank screen for 30 minutes, just...
Television at its best.
Yes, modern television at its best, I would say, more than anything else, because it is all pretty much shite wherever we go, so...
It really is. Have you been watching much? Have you been still going to your press feedings? Are they still happening?
They are, yes. No, they have been moved to Silverburn. I was at the first one 2 weeks ago at Silverburn, which is fine. I can get there reasonably straightforwardly. It's fine. I got a bus into Buchanan Street and then a bus from Buchanan Street then to Silverburn. There's one that runs, it's one of these circular ones that goes down to Silverburn and round Crooks and then goes back to Silverburn and then goes back into town. It goes on the motorway and then 77 to get back into town. So it takes about 20 minutes or something. So that's okay, and that's every 30 minutes. So if I time it right, I can have just maybe a 10-minute wait. It just all depends on how quickly my bus gets into town. But the last one was started at 10 o'clock in the morning. So I was able to get a bus at 8:20 from here, and I was in Silverburn for 9:30, which
that's really good.
It's pretty good. That was all right. Yeah, just pretty short turnaround. But usually the press screenings start at 9:30, so I'm going to have to get a bus earlier in order to get in, which is fine. It's all right, At least they're still doing them. That's the main thing. Yeah. But they announced that before the cinema announced it was shutting.
Yeah.
So
and has there been any word on what, because I think they have said it, the last I heard, certainly, it was maybe that Omniplex. I think they're an Irish brand that have bought the one in Clydebank, and I think they'll take that as well, or is that...
They have bought the building, yes. They took over as the owners of the building with Cineworld still as the tenants, and I think they told them, tenancy's up, get out. And they gave them a wee bit of time, obviously, to do it. Obviously, this has been going on for a couple of months now because there were rumours going about, and stuff had been leaked that had been sent to staff and all that. So I think that they are looking probably to take it over and, do the same as they've done with the one. It was Empire Cinemas, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
The one, yeah. I think that's one of the smaller chains. They've got cinemas all over the country. I don't know if they've taken over Empire Cinemas, though. That's the thing. But
yeah, I don't know.
I suspect they will keep it as a cinema because it will cost too much. You basically need to... Yeah, you can't really change. I mean, how are they going to keep any of that building intact? They would basically just need to take it all down, I think. The glass frontage and all that. They wouldn't need that if it was going to be like apartment buildings or anything like that, So I don't know.
Mean, I do await the mysterious fire that happens to all Glaswegian buildings that are empty, but it would be such a shame because that would, I know there's the view, but that would mean there was really no big cinema in town. And I get that maybe less people are going and stuff, because I feel like every time you went to Renfield Street, there was less staff and the escalators weren't working and some of the concessions weren't open. And it did feel like it was sort of on its way out. And I do understand that's probably to do with footfall and stuff like that. But it would be strange to have no big cinema in the middle of town, I feel.
Yes, it would be weird. Obviously, like you say, there's the one down at St Enoch's, the View Cinema, which I've not been in yet. I can't comment on
It's lovely. I went to see what was that called again? the German film that won a lot of Oscars and stuff the year before. It was set in Auschwitz and Rudolph.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
Anyways, I went to see a screening of that in between film festival stuff last year. That's it. Yep. And it's a lovely cinema. It's like obviously like the nice seats. I think you can get food and stuff like that. Although because I'd gone in like a Tuesday at like 11 o'clock in the morning, there wasn't really like any staff there and stuff like that. So I imagine on a Saturday night it's busier, obviously because it's in the Scenic Centre. But it's like it's kind of like a fancy. It's a bit like your Odeon VIP setup, really. Yeah. So
the tickets are a little bit dearer than the one out at the Fort. I've been going to the one out at the Fort actually a couple of times. That's quite nice. It's a bit smaller and there's plenty of parking and everything there because there's a multi-storey car park as well as a massive big car park or car parks at the Fort. So there's always plenty of space and it's cheap. It's like £5 for a ticket or even cheaper if you've got, like I've got the civil service deals thing so you can get like 10% off and things like that, which is all adds up, it's all fairly decent. So I think that's what I'm going to continue to do. My Cineworld Unlimited runs out, I think it's the end of December or just the start of January. So I'm going to keep it going until then, just in case there are other films that I want to see while I'm down at Silverburn. But I'm not going to continue. It's not worth it.
I guess that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, Silverburn is like still our primary cinema. It's where we would go. So that we will keep the unlimited cards. But it does, I think they've brought down the price again. So I think it's going to be like $12.99 a month or something like that. Just which again, if you see a couple of films, pays for itself. But it just does seem really strange that, as I say, that town might be without a sort of big cinema. And I feel for cinemas in a way because like there is a lot of pressure, but then to obviously get people into the door. But then when you do go into the door, if you don't have a card, like for example, like families are complaining that, by the time you buy, say, 4 tickets and your kids want popcorn and juice and all the rest of it, it becomes like a £60 day out as opposed to like a sort of cheap alternative. And so people will just say, I'll just wait till that comes on screening or whatever because I'm paying for the streaming service anyway. So it's just, I think like cinema, well, some cinemas anyway, or chains certainly seem to be in a bit of a mess when it comes to getting folks in through the door and keeping them as customers, obviously.
They're relying too much on the summer blockbusters actually generating income for them now, and they're the sort of the masters of their own demise in a way, because when cinema chains were sort of at the top of their game, they instructed the studios about how much they were going to take off the top and how long the films were going to actually be shown at the cinema. So the relationship between the filmmakers, actual studios, and the cinemas themselves was not good, and it was kind of broken in a way. Because if you remember back, it used to be the studios owned cinema chains.
They all had their own cinema. Yep, exactly.
And there was sort of like anti-competition regulation brought in and says you can't do that because you're basically in charge of everything. It's it had to be broken up, had to be changed. So sort of these cinema chains come into being more rather than the studios dictating, and it went the other way from the studios making all the money to the studios making less than half usually of a ticket sale, because the cinema chains were saying, well, if you don't give us what we want, we're not going to show your film. And there was a pressure that, yes, they had to do that, especially in places that only had maybe one cinema, like a town that only had one. And if it wasn't going to show a film, then the studio wouldn't get the money coming in. But now, since lockdown, that's kind of all changed. Lockdown's been a biggie in terms of that, because the cinema chains started to dictate what films were really going to go into the actual cinemas themselves and how long they were going to go in. They would say, well, we're not going to let you have a film in our cinemas for 12 weeks, which means that it's another 8 weeks or 12 weeks before we can actually release it digitally or, in home formats or anything like physical media. So now they negotiated that right down to, it's like 3 weeks or something, 3 or 4 weeks, really, from the time it finishes in cinema. Yeah, because we've seen that an awful lot. It's like a month after a film.
I suppose Superman's already on streaming, actually.
Well, that apparently was to tie in with Peacemaker coming out to get a bump with that. But even then, you're kind of saying, well, I know the film was very successful and it could probably have ran for a wee while longer, but all of that costs the studio money as well, because they're still having to provide digital prints and everything as well. So just move on to streaming as quickly as they possibly can, which doesn't do the cinemas any good, because they're losing revenue. It might not be massive revenue by week 5 and week 6, but it's still revenue for them.
Of course.
They're not having to bring in new films and everything all the time. And what you see with the cinemas now is when there's a big film, they basically batter it to death. For the first 3-4 weeks. It's on loads and loads of screens. We saw that with like the big Avengers films and stuff. There was like 42 screenings in a day. The whole cinema. And now that puts people off, and they're not wanting to go and they may have seen the Avengers film on the second or third day it came out, and then a week later they look at this and they say, there's nothing on.
It's just all Avengers still.
Film. Yeah. And they're not going to go back and see something else. So therefore, you get out of the way of going regularly, and then people say, well, I just couldn't be bothered because it was really expensive and there wasn't anything that I really wanted to see. So, and we've talked about it as well with films that, especially with sort of recent ones we've talked about, they've been in the cinema for like 2 weeks, and it's dead easy to miss a film that's only been there a couple of weeks. And then a lot of the time, yes, they do come to streaming, but there are a significant number of them that just tend to sort of disappear and then pop up about 6 months later. It's weird. There's no consistency. And because of that, people just say, well, I've got plenty of stuff I can watch anyway. There's plenty of good television I can watch. I don't need to watch films. And that hurts cinemas more than it hurts studios. Still hurts studios, obviously, but it hurts cinemas more because they need regular punters coming through the door, and they're just not getting that.
Of course. I mean, like that Bring Her Back came out just before we went on holiday, and I was like, we'll catch it once we come back. I was like, it's a big horror. We went to see together on the Friday night, and I was like, oh, we'll catch Bring Her Back once we're back. I'm sure it will still be out. No. And I was like, oh, well, maybe it's on streaming. So you check that Just Watch UK. I use that website like for finding out where, no, it's nowhere. And I was like, oh, okay. It was such a big, like, because obviously there's quite a few big horrors that came out. I thought it would at least still be in the cinema or maybe on a streaming platform, but it's disappeared. And I'm like, okay, so do I wait? Or, do I try and, is it going to come back to cinemas, or is it going to be on a streaming platform? Do you just try and pre-order a DVD or whatever? It just, there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason with some of the films, how they just disappear at some points. And then, as you say, there's maybe like a 6-month gap, and you're like, oh, that's longer than I would have anticipated. Whereas you've got Superman already on a streaming platform, and I feel like it's barely been in the cinema as well.
Yeah, it just keeps the conversation going about films when they come so quickly to streaming services. And you can actually get them now. Sky advertises it quite a lot, that you can buy films like the new Jurassic World film, for instance, which is only just coming out of cinemas, but you can watch that as a premium service on Sky for
it's like £30.
£20. But they're advertising that as being still at this. Watch it while it's still at the cinema.
And I suppose
that's the big thing.
It's cheaper than like £30 actually. Still, if you've got 4 or 5 people in your house, it's still cheaper than paying for everyone to. Honestly, I read this book on holiday called Pandora's Box about how television models have changed and how obviously they've sort of taken a bite out of cinema as well. So it starts like pre-Sopranos, the book, and then goes all the way through how that changed TV, how different shows came along, how various cable networks were all basically on their arse in terms of they didn't have like a hit show and they ploughed loads of money into stuff. And then you get to Netflix. And I didn't realise this at the time, but obviously the cable model at the time was you bought one episode, so one pilot, and you tried it. If it didn't work, nothing else was spent on it. Netflix went absolutely mental. They got a hold of, obviously, David Fincher, House of Cards, and went, yeah, we'll pay you, I think it's like 200 million up front, 2 seasons. And of course, all the cable channels are going, shit, we don't do that. We buy one episode. Why have you bought 2 seasons? And then it talked about the proliferation of all the different cable channels having all their different streamer services. So HBO Max, Paramount Plus, Peacock, all these various other ones that have come about, and they're now sort of taking a chunk out of cinema as well, because like Apple TV, for example, has started producing its own films, and so has Netflix. And there was the big debate about whether Roma should be in running for the Oscars because it was a Netflix feature, and it basically went through how the entire model has changed. And it made me think of, we've talked about this before, like there's so many different streaming platforms and you're paying a fortune for each of them, and yet sometimes you will still sit down and go, there's nothing on, even though you've got like 5 or 6 of them. But of course, because television has evolved to keep up with these streaming services, and the cable services now have their own streaming platforms, that's now taking a chunk out of cinema as well, because they're now all, oh, well, Apple TV made an F1 movie, right? Well, we're going to go and do blah, blah, blah instead. We're going to put all this. So it's not even just that they're competing with each other for half an hour of your time of a sitcom or a drama. They're now going to be competing with each other sort of on the big screen as well. And that's obviously, it's mental how it's all changed, and it's changed at a rate of knots, actually, because if you think about it, that book started, when did The Sopranos come out? What, early 2000s?
The first season was like 1999 or something, but it really was the 2000s that
it sort of got into its stride. So there was also a chapter on Deadwood as well, which I loved, and basically it spent itself into cancellation because it was becoming far too expensive to produce each episode, which I thought was quite interesting. But if you think about it, like, let's call it 1999 through to just now, like in the space of like 25, 26 years, the entire landscape of how we consume and watch and take in has changed so dramatically that it's kind of nuts when you think about it.
Oh, it's been a real seismic shift that's happened in increments. So, like you say, you don't notice it. It's just one thing after another. There are biggies like when, like say, Netflix actually coming into being and having so much money at their disposal they could throw it. And the way that completely changed the way that networks did shows, because for so many years, a network would they would get pilots done of shows, like you say, and a lot of the time they would say, no, we don't want it. I mean, there's been pilots for all sorts of it. If you look back in some of the failed pilots, there's been pilots for so many different things that have just not got off the ground, and it's like all these massive big names on it. If you look through somebody's IMDb, like a sort of a reasonably big name actor, and you'll see there's something like Aquaman, the Aquaman TV show, and it's been, one episode, and there's been nothing else. There's just been a pilot for that kind of thing. It's bizarre because it just doesn't get picked up. But then, as well as that, TV networks would then go through this thing called pilot season, where they produce all these pilots. TV shows would be backing them, and they take up or not take up. The ones that they took up were still in danger as well.
Oh, absolutely.
You could have a show that it starts, and then after 6 episodes of a first season, it would get cancelled, and that would be it. It would just, if they'd made 6 episodes, they might only show 3 of them.
Yeah.
So people are starting to invest in programs, and then it would get cut off at the knees, and you're saying, well, what's the actual point? But now Netflix and Prime and all that are doing the same. They didn't used to, like I say, they used to honour their agreements of having like full seasons and things like that. But even them, they are not doing that now. They're doing like a season and then just cutting off after a season. There's one, is it Étoile? It's called it's about ballet dancers being swapped from New York to Paris. It's a big series. It's on Prime, and it was commissioned for 2 seasons. First season came out, didn't do very well, and they just cancelled it anyway. So they just said, no, we're not going to do the second season of it. It's just gone. This is what it's coming round to now. It's because there's so much money involved in it that they're not willing to take the gamble and put these shows out because they know that they will not be popular. But yes, it's bizarre. What was the name of the book?
It's called Pandora's Box by Peter Riskind. I would highly recommend it. Actually, as I was reading it, I was like, John and Sibby would love this book. But it's quite funny because it's quite gossipy as well. So it's giving you the sort of behind the scenes chatter of like, naughty executives, etc. at these various cable channels and stuff like that. But for me, obviously, the main thing was just sort of looking back about how television and sort of consumption has changed, and each chapter is kind of dedicated to either a different cable channel or a different TV show. And they were talking about how basically like The Sopranos ending had kind of tanked, and how the HBO didn't have another hit on its hands until True Blood. And they talk about all these different shows that they sunk money into, and you're like, oh, I vaguely remember that. And it, obviously cancelled after 5 minutes because it wasn't performing well. But it obviously just goes to show as well how cutthroat the cable channels are, but also now with, as I say, the advent of streaming. Because the thing is, the streamer's job essentially is to grow subscriber numbers. So they're obviously throwing money at, like you say, these kind of big productions. But if they're not performing, they are much more willing to cut because, if they can't grow their subscribers by X% every month, they're not going to have the money to make these big shows or, collaborate on these big films and stuff like that. So they're much more likely just to go, no, that's not happening anymore. So it was a great read, and I can't remember where I saw it. I just picked it up on a whim, but it was just completely fascinating to go, oh my God, over the span of 25 years or 26 years, whatever, the way we watch and do. And even the fact they were saying that Netflix dropped all the episodes of House of Cards at once, and the cable channels are basically going, what the fuck? Like, because they're a one a week episode. But then conversely, we've sort of come back to that because I'm saving up all the Alien episodes on Disney Plus so I can go and watch them at the end. But we've kind of got into the habit where we expect everything to drop, or at least like half a season to drop at once. Like we're not used to having to wait once a week now, because usually you just get everything all at once. So yeah, but it was a really kind of fascinating read, and it makes you wonder about where things are going, obviously, because these streamers are using algorithms to predict, what you would like and what they should produce, and you just think, right, okay. And I was watching with interest Guillermo del Toro at Venice, because he was talking about Frankenstein, which obviously is going to be in cinemas, but is going to Netflix fairly quickly.
Yep.
And he was talking about how AI is the enemy and CGI, and he wants to do things practically as much as humanly possible, and that he's not interested in using AI. He actually said it's quite funny. He was like, I'm not worried about artificial intelligence. I'm worried about natural stupidity. That was the wee sound bite that he gave. But his sort of thing is sort of rallying against like AI scripts and, AI tweaking your film and all this sort of thing. But I suspect will not be long before we have the first fully AI written book or AI produced script, or,
apparently
animated series or whatever.
It is there already. What they're finding, or what writers are finding when they're brought in to do versions and iterations of a script, they're finding that the first version of the script is AI generated, and then they're expected to work on that and tidy up, humanize it. But the idea, the core of that, like somebody saying, I'm looking for a 1950s set spy thriller in Vienna, featuring a love triangle and all the political Cold War intrigue in the background, give me a screenplay for a film that will last an hour and 3/4, include elements of Vienna city itself and the surrounding areas, that kind of idea. And you'll find that something will pop up really quickly on that. The more information, the more detailed information you feed into these AI engines, the more you get back. It's like I did a wee experiment of, I wanted no, it wasn't the podcast one. It was an image one that I did. I wanted a male model sitting on top of a unicorn that's crying. It's in a garden, but the garden there's rain in the garden, but there are rainbows behind it, and it produced all this.
Wow!
Just right, almost instantly. There you go, and the unicorn was crying. So it's just it's crazy. But yeah, the AI thing, obviously, with the podcast is interesting as well. That's still quite immature, because it will become more mature when you can put in your own voices, and it uses that, and it uses it sort of in a natural language way as well, which it does at the moment. But if you can get that past the initial just using set voices that they've got, which obviously takes away a bit more compute power, then it needs samples of people's voices. Like what we'd probably do, or be able to do at some point, is say, we want to do a podcast based on this text, and we want to use these people on it. Here is the text that you're going to take and create a podcast, and here are samples of the voices. Just pointing them to one of the podcasts that we do. This is person one is the first person speaking, person two is the second person speaking. now go and create something, and that's not very far away at all. It really isn't.
No.
And at the moment, obviously, the things like that, Notebook LM is free, but there will be paid ones, and you can be sure that there are companies out there looking at using those rather than paying for presenters.
Well, do you know the thing is, I suppose in a way, like studios have done this for, like, I'm thinking of like Gladiator, when what's his face had passed away, so they had to sort of use clips of his voice that they already had and all that sort of thing. And then in one of the more recent Star Wars, they resurrected Peter Cushing, I think, for one of the ones. And then obviously you've got the Alien franchise where they had used, obviously, so we kind of are already doing that. Now, obviously that you assume is with the consent of the estates involved.
It has to be, yes. Yeah.
So we're kind of already doing that based on people's footage and voice work and stuff that already exists. I'm not saying it's not everyone agrees with it. Obviously, a lot of people do find that very unethical to bring back an actor who's passed away or whatever to do a scene, but we're kind of already there in terms of being.
Yeah.
It might not always look the best, but we're already doing it.
It's not far away from looking totally spot on. That's the thing. It used to be the one with Gladiator is quite interesting because that was Oliver Reed who died.
That's it.
And the way that they got around that, they had some of his voice anyway and used that, and they brought other people in and mixed in the voice, and he was in shadow and things like that. It wasn't sort of full face, but with the likes of like Carrie Fisher, for instance, in the last Star Wars film, because obviously she had died and she was in the last film, they had footage from her that didn't get used in The Last Jedi, I think it was.
Yeah.
And they used that and altered it so that it would fit in with everything. And like you say, with the Peter Cushing one, they brought somebody in and did mocap. It was a guy actually doing the acting and the voice at the same time, and it was just a wee bit out as well.
A bit uncanny.
Yeah. Well, Mark Hamill's done it himself, obviously, for The Mandalorian. So there's been various things like that. But yes, I think what we'll find is probably already in place is that when actors are signing up with agencies, part of the agreement is their image rights and their voice rights, sort of in perpetuity, that gets used for things. You know, if you're say you sign up to work on the Avatar films, then part of that deal will be your performance that has been captured can be used in any way for future projects. You'll get paid for it, but this is where you'll get paid for it. But we have the right to do anything with that, obviously within sort of legal limits. You're not talking about putting them into like porn or anything like that, but anything to do with that.
Although I'm sure Avatar porn does exist.
I'm sure it does, yeah. I'll neither confirm nor deny that. So. But yes, I think that's going to be more the future now. They will be bringing people back in, you know, Humphrey Bogart in a film. But it's going to be more difficult with older properties that have estates around what they actually have their image rights and all that. The sort of the canny ones have set these up so that it's difficult to just use something, and they get licenses renewed and everything, so it doesn't actually fall foul of the copyright protection after, like, it's different for different things. It's like 70 years for music, and you know, it's 100 years for books or something.
Something like that,
yeah. So there's all these things in play, but you can have it so if you make new editions of things and change things slightly, you make sure you're just elongating the process. You're just making sure that you've got copyright. Look at the Tolkien estate, for instance.
Oh yeah.
The amount of money that they make from basically saying yes, you can still use the books and everything, and that must be coming up maybe in the next sort of 10 years or so, because I think it was the 20s, wasn't it? That he started to write those books. Yeah. So they're obviously trying to cash in as much as they can just now.
But it's funny though, because like for younger actors, it's maybe the older ones that, and I say older one, by that I mean like your Humphrey Bogarts, your Audrey Hepburn, although famously there was the big debacle over her likeness had appeared in a Galaxy, at like Galaxy Chocolate Actor.
Yes,
her son had signed off on that, so there was like no quibbles as far as he was concerned. I do think older actors are probably going to be protected because, like you say, there's like an estate around it. But if you're a younger actor coming up and, there's a pressure to sign a contract so that you can, star in a big film or whatever, there probably is some clause in there somewhere that if you don't have a good lawyer or somebody looking out for your best interest, to go, are you aware that they can use your voice to do, this and this, or they can use your image? So I feel like maybe for the younger generation coming up, they're probably going to be less protected from this sort of thing.
Yes, yeah, they're going to need all of the power of their good agents to work this out. Yeah, and it's only the ones who have this good representation will be able to protect themselves. Other ones of sort of lesser actors will find themselves exploited, because that tends to what happen with extras. They're signing away their image rights, and they're used as extras in those sort of big sort of crowd scenes and things like that. So they can be reused, so they can use their faces and everything again and again. They only used to employ them once.
Yeah.
And then they can make use of them again, and it's not necessarily more economical, but it's easier in terms of production, because you're not having to wrangle a couple of hundred extras for a crowd scene, say in a stadium. You've got all these images there that you can just slot in, and the bodies are fairly easy to replicate digitally, so you're just pasting real faces onto it, so it doesn't look really stupid like that Disney TV program where they put in to bulk out the crowd, they put in these sort of avatars, and they look like characters from The Sims.
I know.
And it was really obvious that they were just, they were in the background, but people were zooming in and going, "What the hell is that?"
Yeah.
They were moving awkwardly and everything like that as well. It was quite early on, but yeah.
Well, Will Smith's been accused of that this week, hasn't he, with his tour that he's doing? So he's been accused of, like, he's put video and stuff up of, like, the crowds, and everyone's like, well, that person's only got 3 fingers, or that person's moving kind of thing. And he's been accused of, like, fleshing out his concert, like, crowds with AI and stuff like that, which is quite funny as well.
That's, again, I think we've talked about before, isn't it? It's a big problem. They're not filling out stadiums and things like that. People are picking and choosing what they're going to see because of the price of concerts, and there's these sites like seat fillers and things like that that they do tickets very cheaply, and you're just told, don't tell anybody, don't speak to anybody about this, because they don't want the artist to be embarrassed. And it's happening more and more. There's so many things. Like there was one for that show Film First. They were advertising tickets for all of the Bond films that were getting shown at the Edinburgh Film Festival.
Yeah.
Because there was no uptake in the tickets. So it was a couple of pounds booking fee, and that was it. And you were getting to see all these films. It was just crazy because, and that's just one thing, that's almost circular back to, like, people are not going to cinemas, but they're not going to see things that have been set up, especially for, like, festivals and stuff. And it's the same with comedy, drama, what have you, music. If it's not selling out immediately, it's not selling out anything that it should be, which is a bit of a problem, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think cost is a factor, but I'm surprised that, like, the James Bond film's not getting, like, you would think people would want to go and see that, but I suppose it's one of these things where if you've only got, say, 2 days at Edinburgh Festival, you maybe just want to go and see some new stuff that you're not going to get to see, whereas you can maybe watch the Bond movies at home, whatever. It's tricky.
It is.
I just realised that I could have had Matilda on that list as well, and I can't believe I forgot about that, because that's one of my favourites as well.
Well, when we do a musicals-based one, then there's lots of
crossover.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Matilda was really good. I really liked that film.
I loved that back in the day. I spent an awful long time trying to get objects to move with my mind. It's not real.
That speaks volumes.
Yeah, it does. It really does.
Yeah.
So I paid my therapist a fortune.